A single dad repairs a stranger's camper. She turns out to be a famous billionaire escaping. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's amazing story. It all began on a rainy afternoon, when a single dad was fixing a stranger's camper in the middle of nowhere. Little did he know, the woman he helped would turn out to be someone completely unexpected, someone with a life far beyond what he could imagine. As Mark sat there, holding the cup of coffee she had given him, he found himself lost in thought. The quiet hum of the rain against the windows was the only sound that filled the space. The woman, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, had just dropped a bombshell. A billionaire? It seemed almost impossible. She certainly didn't look the part. She was calm, collected, and unassuming, like someone who didn't want to be seen or recognized. But now, as the words hung between them, Mark couldn't help but wonder why she had chosen to share that with him. Was it a test? Some kind of elaborate game? Or was there more to her story than he could imagine? He set the coffee cup down on the counter, trying to steady his nerves. "You don't look like someone who would want to hide," he said carefully, his voice quiet but direct. "Why run away from everything?" She sighed, running her fingers through her hair as she stared out the window. For a moment, it seemed like she wasn't going to answer. But then, her voice, soft but firm, cut through the silence. "Because the life I've been living isn't really mine," she said, her gaze distant. "It's all expectations, people telling me what I should do, where I should go. I'm just tired." Mark nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. He had his own struggles, his own burdens, but it seemed like hers were of a completely different nature. He had always worked hard for what he had, fixing things, making ends meet. But this woman, who had everything, felt like she had nothing at all. The contrast made him uneasy. "Sounds lonely," he said, his voice softer than he intended. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Loneliness is something you get used to when you're always in the public eye," she said, her tone flat. "You don't know who's genuine, who's there because they want something from you." Mark could sense there was more to her story, but he didn't press. Instead, he changed the subject, trying to lighten the mood. "So, what now?" he asked. "You just take off and disappear?" She gave a small, almost reluctant smile. "I don't know. I just needed a moment time to think, to be alone. Maybe I'll head back home tomorrow. Or maybe I'll just keep going. I'm not sure yet." Mark leaned against the counter, his hands shoved into his pockets. "I get that," he said, his voice quieter now. "Sometimes you just need to step away, clear your head." A long silence stretched between them. Mark wasn't sure if he was supposed to say anything more, but as he glanced at her, he realized something. This woman, this billionaire who seemed to have it all, was still just a person. And deep down, she was just as lost as he was in his own way. The thought was both comforting and unsettling. "Thank you," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Mark raised an eyebrow. "For what?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "For listening," she said simply. "For not judging me. It means more than you know." Mark didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded. "It's nothing," he muttered. "Everyone deserves to be heard." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes softening as if she were seeing him in a new light. "You're different," she said quietly. "Most people would have walked away by now." Mark shrugged, not sure what to make of her comment. He was just being himself, doing what he could to help. But it was clear that to her, it was more than just a simple act of kindness. As the conversation drifted into a comfortable silence, the woman stood up from the counter. "I should get some rest," she said, her voice sounding a little more tired than before. "It's been a long day." Mark nodded, feeling like it was his cue to leave. He didn't want to overstay his welcome. And after all, she was a guest in her own way, even if she didn't want to admit it. "Of course," he said. "I'll let you get some sleep." As he turned to leave, she stopped him with a soft call of his name. "Mark," she said, and when he looked back, she was standing by the door, her expression serious. I'm not sure what's next for me, or even what I want, but I don't want to forget this, forget tonight. Her voice was almost a whisper, but it carried a weight to it. Mark felt a strange warmth spread through him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was the kindness, or maybe it was just the simple human connection they had shared. "You won't," he said, his voice low. "You won't forget." As he left the cabin, stepping into the cool night air, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change him in ways he didn't fully understand. He had helped a stranger, sure, but in some strange way, she had helped him too. And as the rain continued to fall, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen next, and where this unexpected meeting would lead them both. The following day, Mark couldn't stop thinking about the woman he had helped. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the dampness from the night before. As he worked on his truck again, the small, quiet town around him felt somehow emptier, like something had shifted in the world, and he wasn't sure if it was him or if it was her. He had always prided himself on his ability to fix things, whether it was a car, a broken pipe, or a problem at work. But helping this stranger, this woman who had everything and yet felt so alone, had made him question what it really meant to help someone. It wasn't just about fixing things, it was about understanding, listening, and being there when no one else would. He had barely had time to think more about it when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he saw a message from an unknown number. "Mark, it's me. I'm at the diner in town. Would you like to join me for breakfast?" His heart skipped a beat. He had figured that their brief encounter would end the moment he left her cabin. But here she was, reaching out again. Why? Curiosity pulled him toward the diner, and as he entered, he saw her sitting in a corner booth, looking much more at ease than the night before. Her usual polished demeanor was still there, but now there was something warmer about her, more human. As he walked over, she looked up and smiled. "I wasn't sure you would come," she said, her tone lighter than it had been the night before. Mark slid into the booth across from her, feeling out of place in the small-town diner. It was a far cry from the luxury of her cabin, but that seemed to be exactly what she needed. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again," he said, laughing nervously. "You know, I'm just a mechanic. I'm sure you have a million other things to do." She shook her head, her smile never faltering. "No, I wanted to see you. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about not being judged, about listening. I needed that more than I realized." Mark was quiet for a moment, trying to process her words. He had never really thought of himself as someone who had wisdom to share. He was just a guy trying to get by, helping people when he could. But here she was, thanking him for something so simple, something he had done without a second thought. "I just helped you out," he said, shrugging. "Anyone would have done the same." She met his gaze, her eyes softening. "Not everyone would, and not everyone would understand. I'm not used to, not being seen as just the billionaire, or the one with everything. It's hard to get past that." Mark could see the weight in her words, and for the first time, he realized just how much pressure she must have been under. He had assumed that her life, with all the money and power, was easy. But now, he could see that it wasn't. It was just as complicated and lonely as his own. "So, what happens now?" Mark asked, feeling the need to break the heavy silence that had settled between them. "What do you do when you just need to get away from it all?" She leaned back in her seat, taking a deep breath. "I don't know yet," she said, her voice quiet. "I'm trying to figure it out. I don't want to go back to the life I had. I don't want to go back to being just a name or a brand. I want to be me. But I don't know who that is anymore." Mark nodded, understanding more than he let on. He had spent a lot of time trying to figure out who he was too, especially after losing his wife and raising his son on his own. There were days when he felt like he had nothing left to give, like everything he had worked for was slipping away. But helping this woman, offering his time and listening to her, made him feel like he still had something valuable to offer. "It's okay to not have everything figured out," Mark said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You don't have to know who you are right away. Sometimes, it's about taking things one step at a time." She smiled at him then, a real smile, one that reached her eyes. "Thank you, Mark. I don't think anyone has ever said that to me before." Just then, the waitress arrived with their food, and the moment seemed to break. They both started eating, talking about small things, the weather, the town, anything to fill the silence. But as the meal went on, Mark felt something shift between them. It wasn't just a simple act of kindness anymore. He wasn't just some mechanic who had helped her out. There was a connection here, something deeper than either of them had expected. After breakfast, they stood up together, and Mark walked her to her camper, where she was going to leave for the next leg of her journey. "So, what's next for you?" Mark asked, the question hanging in the air. She smiled faintly, the weight of the decision clear in her eyes. "I don't know. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm ready to figure it out. Maybe I'll stay in town for a little while longer, see where things go. Maybe. Maybe I'll come back here and see you again." Mark smiled, not knowing what to say but feeling something stir inside of him. "I'll be around," he said simply. And as she climbed into her camper and drove away, he realized that this was only the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. Days passed, and Mark found himself thinking about her more than he ever expected. The woman, the billionaire who had come to him for help and changed his life in the process, was still fresh in his mind. He hadn't seen her since their breakfast at the diner, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Her words, her vulnerability, and the way she spoke about wanting to find herself had struck a chord deep within him. He didn't know why, but he felt connected to her in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. Mark had spent the next few days working on his truck, fixing small things around town, and taking care of his son, but it was hard not to wonder what she was doing. What was she thinking? Was she still out there, looking for a way to escape from the world she'd built for herself? His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. "Mark, I'm in town. Could you meet me at the park? I need to talk." His heart skipped a beat. It was her. He quickly replied, "I'll be there." As Mark drove to the park, he tried to push aside the nervous excitement building in his chest. What did she need to talk about? Was she going to tell him that she had made a decision? That she was going back to her life? Or was there more to this? When he arrived at the park, he saw her sitting on a bench, her posture straight, but her eyes looking off into the distance, as if she were lost in thought. She looked up as he approached, and a small, weary smile appeared on her face. "I didn't know if you'd come," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "You seemed like you were ready to leave it all behind. I wasn't sure if I was just another distraction." Mark shook his head. "I said I'd be here," he said with a small smile. "Besides, we never really finished our conversation." She chuckled lightly, motioning for him to sit beside her. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice quieter now. "I've been thinking about everything I said before, about wanting to disappear, about how I thought I needed to get away from everything. But the truth is, I've been running from my own life, and I don't think I can do it anymore." Mark's brow furrowed as he listened to her words. The gravity of what she was saying settling over him. He could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of years spent hiding from something she wasn't sure she could face. "What do you mean?" he asked gently. "What are you running from?" She took a deep breath before answering. "I've been running from myself," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "From the person I used to be before the fame, before the business, before everything that made me feel like I had to be perfect all the time. I'm not perfect, Mark. And I don't want to keep pretending to be. I just want to be myself again. But I don't know how." Mark sat in silence, his heart aching for her. He had always thought that having money, power, and success meant you had everything figured out. But now, seeing her like this, he realized that even the most successful people could feel lost. "You don't have to be perfect," Mark said after a pause. "You're already enough, just the way you are. You've got to stop running from what you really want. It's okay to be scared, but you can't keep hiding from your own life." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for something she hadn't seen before. "I don't know if I can stop running," she whispered. "I've spent so long convincing myself that I had to be someone else to be accepted, to be loved. I don't know if I know who I am anymore." Mark reached out, placing a gentle hand on hers. "It's a journey," he said softly. "You don't have to have it all figured out today, or tomorrow, but you have to take the first step, and I'll be here to help you if you need me." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his, as if she were seeing him in a new light. Finally, she nodded. a small tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't think anyone's ever said that to me before." Mark smiled, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "You're not alone in this. We all need help sometimes, even if we don't want to admit it." They sat there for a while, in comfortable silence, letting the moment sink in. Mark could feel the shift in her, a change in the air between them. She wasn't the same woman who had arrived in town weeks ago, searching for an escape. No, she was someone who was finally ready to face the truth and take control of her own life. Mark didn't know what the future held, but he was certain of one thing. Whatever happened, he would be there to help her, just as she had helped him. As they stood up to leave, she looked at him one last time, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe I'll stick around a little longer," she said, her voice stronger now. "I think I'm finally ready to see where this journey takes me." Mark smiled back, knowing that this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. Weeks went by, and Mark found himself growing closer to the woman he had once considered a stranger. Her name was Sarah, and she had made a decision that was more profound than anything he could have imagined. She had stayed in town, not to run from her life, but to start rebuilding it. Each day, she took small steps toward discovering who she really was, apart from the world that had once defined her. Mark admired her strength and determination. It wasn't easy for her. The world she had left behind wasn't something you could just walk away from. But somehow, Sarah was doing it, one day at a time. The park became their meeting spot, the place where they shared their stories and began to piece together their own truths. It was there that Sarah first shared her dreams, the ones that had been buried beneath the weight of her past. "I used to want it all," she confessed one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. "The money, the power, the success. I thought that was what would make me happy. But I was wrong. Now, I just want to feel free. I want to make a difference, not just for myself, but for others too." Mark listened intently, understanding the shift that was happening within her. He had his own struggles, his own dreams, but he could see how Sarah's desire to make a change was driving her forward. It was a quiet, powerful thing, something that came from deep within. He admired her for that. "You've already made a difference," Mark said softly, his voice steady and sincere. "You're changing your life, and that's the hardest thing to do. But it's also the most important." Sarah smiled at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said quietly. "You've shown me that it's okay to be myself, to not be perfect, to just be real." Mark felt his heart swell with emotion. He had never expected this. He had simply wanted to help, to listen, and in doing so, he had helped both of them. Over time, their friendship blossomed into something more, something neither of them had planned. Mark had always thought he was content with his simple life, raising his son, fixing things, and getting by. But now, with Sarah in his life, he felt a spark, a sense of possibility he hadn't felt in years. It was slow, but the connection between them deepened. They spent more time together, sharing laughs, talking about their pasts, and dreaming about the future. It was clear that they had both found something in each other they didn't even know they were searching for. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the lake, Sarah turned to Mark, her eyes searching his face. "Mark," she began, her voice soft, "I never thought I'd find someone like you. I've spent so much of my life feeling alone, even when I was surrounded by people. But with you, it's different. You make me feel seen, like I matter." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this kind of confession, not from her, but as the words sank in, he realized that he felt the same way. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and full of emotion, "you matter to me. You've always mattered." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You don't have to do this alone anymore. Whatever comes next, I'll be here. For you." She looked at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I don't know what the future holds, Mark," she whispered, "but I know that I want to face it with you." Mark squeezed her hand, his heart full. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet certainty that they had both found something precious in each other. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah continued to rebuild her life, with Mark by her side. She started working with local charities, using her resources to help those who had been forgotten, those who didn't have the same opportunities she once had. And with Mark's support, she found peace in a way she had never experienced before. As for Mark, he had found a new sense of purpose, too. Being with Sarah had opened his eyes to the possibilities beyond his small world. He realized that helping people didn't just mean fixing things, it meant being there, listening, and offering a hand when it was needed the most. One day, Sarah invited him to a local charity event she had organized. It was a simple gathering, but it meant the world to her. Mark watched as she spoke to the crowd, her words full of passion and sincerity. She was no longer hiding behind her wealth or her name. She had found her voice, and she was using it to make the world a better place. As the evening came to a close, Sarah found Mark in the crowd. She walked over to him, a smile lighting up her face. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, her voice full of gratitude. Mark smiled back, his heart swelling with pride. "You did it, Sarah," he said softly. "I was just here to help you believe in yourself." And for the first time in a long while, Sarah truly believed. She had found herself again, not in the luxury of her past life, but in the simplicity of the future she was building. And with Mark by her side, she knew that anything was possible. Months passed, and the small town Mark and Sarah had both come to love had become more than just a place of refuge. It had become home. For Sarah, it wasn't just about escaping her old life anymore. She had found a sense of belonging here, a sense of purpose that she had never known before. Her work with the local charities grew, and she became a source of inspiration for the people around her. She wasn't just the billionaire who had walked away from her fortune. She was Sarah, the woman who had rebuilt herself from the ground up, who had chosen to make a difference with what little she had left. Mark had seen this transformation, and it had changed him too. Being with Sarah had opened his eyes to the kind of life he had been too scared to dream of, one full of possibilities, of new beginnings. He no longer saw himself as just the mechanic, the guy who fixed things for a living. He saw himself as someone who had the power to make a real impact, someone who could be more than just a provider for his son, but a man who could give back to the world in his own way. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. They spent more time together, not just working on projects for the town, but dreaming together about the future. It wasn't just about charity work anymore. They talked about building something bigger, something that could leave a lasting legacy. Sarah's vision was to create a foundation that would help people, especially those who had been through the struggles she had faced herself. And Mark, with his practical skills and hands-on approach, was the perfect partner to help make that dream a reality. But as they worked together on this new venture, they realized that they were building more than just a foundation. They were building a life together. One afternoon, as they sat together at the old diner, talking about their plans for the foundation, Mark looked at Sarah, his heart full of affection. "I never thought I'd be doing something like this," he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Helping people, creating something that lasts. I always thought it was just about getting by, you know? But with you, I've realized that there's more to life than just surviving." Sarah reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice soft but full of meaning. "You've shown me that I don't have to be afraid of what comes next, that I can trust myself, and trust the people who care about me." Mark squeezed her hand gently, his eyes locking with hers. "You don't have to be afraid of anything anymore, Sarah. You've already come so far, and I'll be here, with you, every step of the way." It was a promise that wasn't just about their work or the future they were building, but a promise to always stand by each other, no matter what. The weeks that followed were filled with hard work and long days, but they were also filled with moments of joy, of laughter, and of quiet contentment. As the foundation began to take shape, Sarah and Mark both realized how far they had come. They weren't just creating a charity. They were creating a legacy, a future for themselves and for the people they cared about. One evening, after a particularly long day of planning and organizing, they sat on the porch of Sarah's cabin, watching the sunset together. Mark took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air on his skin. "I think we've finally done it," he said, his voice filled with satisfaction. "We've built something real." Sarah smiled at him, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of the setting Sunday. "We didn't just build a foundation, Mark. We built a life. Together. Mark's heart swelled at her words. It wasn't just the charity or the foundation that had changed. It was their lives, their hearts, and their futures. They had found something more than they had ever expected, a love that was built on trust, on shared dreams, and on the willingness to support each other no matter where the road took them. As the last light of the day faded, Sarah leaned her head on Mark's shoulder, her heart at peace for the first time in years. She had found her home, not just in the town, but in the man sitting beside her. And in that quiet moment, with the stars beginning to appear above, Sarah realized that this was exactly where she was meant to be. It had been nearly a year since Sarah had first come to town, seeking refuge from the life she had once known. A year filled with growth, both for her and for Mark. Together, they had built not only a foundation, but a life they could both be proud of. The town had become a second home for both of them, a place where they could finally be who they were meant to be, without the weight of past expectations. Their work with the foundation had started to make a real difference, and Sarah could feel the fulfillment she had longed for when she had been running from her life. But the more she gave to others, the more she realized there was still something missing, a final piece that she hadn't figured out yet. Mark had noticed the change in her, the quiet longing in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. It wasn't that she wasn't happy, but there was a deeper, more personal question that seemed to be weighing on her mind. One evening, as they sat together on the porch after a long day, Sarah turned to Mark, her face thoughtful, almost distant. "Mark, do you ever wonder if we've really found what we were looking for?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark paused, looking out at the horizon, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. "I think we're still figuring it out," he said after a moment, his voice steady. "We've come a long way, Sarah. We've built something good here, but maybe there's more to discover, both out there and within ourselves." Sarah nodded, her gaze shifting back to him. "I feel like I've learned so much this past year. I've learned to trust again, to let go of the fear that held me back. But there's still something inside me, something that keeps me from fully embracing everything we've created. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm not completely whole yet." Mark looked at her, his heart aching for the woman who had come so far but still carried the weight of her past. He had watched her change, watched her open up in ways he never thought possible. And yet, he could see that there was still a part of her that felt incomplete. "Maybe it's about giving yourself permission to be fully who you are, without holding back," he said gently. "You've spent so much time being everything for everyone else, maybe now it's time to be everything for yourself." The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the truth in them. She had spent so much time trying to fix others, to help them heal, that she had neglected to focus on her own healing. It was a difficult truth, but one she knew she had to face. "I don't know if I can ever fully let go of the past," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "But I think I'm ready to try. I want to move forward, not just for the people around me, but for myself. I want to feel whole, like I belong here, not just as someone giving back, but as someone who is allowed to receive, too." Mark reached out and took her hand in his touch warm and comforting. "You've already given so much, Sarah," he said quietly. "You deserve to receive just as much. And you don't have to do it alone. I'll be here, by your side, every step of the way." Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of his words sink in. In that moment, she realized that the final piece she had been searching for wasn't something she could find in the world around her. It was within her, and it was about allowing herself to be loved, to be seen, and to be enough just as she was. The next few weeks were filled with quiet reflection for Sarah. She spent more time alone, walking through the woods, sitting by the lake, and reconnecting with herself. Mark gave her the space she needed, never pushing her, but always offering his support when she was ready to talk. Slowly, Sarah began to feel a sense of peace settling within her. She didn't have all the answers, and she knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. One evening, as the sun set and the stars began to appear in the sky, Sarah stood at the edge of the lake, looking out over the water. Mark joined her, standing silently by her side. She turned to him, a soft smile on her lips. "I think I finally get it," she said, her voice full of quiet strength. "I've found my place here. I've found my peace, and I've found you. Mark smiled back at her, his heart full of love and pride. "And I've found you, too." They stood there together, the cool evening air wrapping around them, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it side by side, building a future full of love, hope, and purpose. Their journey was far from over, but Sarah knew now that she didn't have to walk it alone. She had found her home, not just in the town, but in Mark and in herself. As the days turned into months, Sarah and Mark found themselves falling deeper into the rhythm of their new life. The foundation they had worked so hard to build continued to grow, touching more lives than they had ever imagined. The town had become a beacon of hope, not just for the people who lived there, but for Sarah and Mark as well. They had built something together, something that was not just about giving back, but about creating a space where people could heal and grow. Sarah had found the peace she had been seeking for so long, and Mark had discovered a sense of purpose that went beyond fixing things. They were no longer just a mechanic and a billionaire, they were partners in every sense of the word, working together to make a difference in the world around them. One evening, after a particularly busy day of organizing a new project for the foundation, Sarah and Mark sat together in their favorite spot by the lake. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the water, and the air was filled with the sound of birds chirping in the distance. Sarah leaned back against Mark, her head resting on his shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "I never imagined this would be my life. I always thought I was meant for something bigger, something that would make me feel important. But now, I realize that what we've built here, what we've done, that's the most important thing." Mark smiled, his arm wrapping around her, pulling her closer. "I think we've found something even bigger than we imagined," he said quietly. "Not just in the foundation, but in each other. In this life we've created together." Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with affection for the man beside her. She had come so far, in such a short amount of time. The fear and uncertainty that had once clouded her mind were gone, replaced with a quiet confidence she never thought she would find. She had learned to embrace her past, to accept the parts of herself she had tried to hide for so long. And now, with Mark by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. "I don't think I could have done it without you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've been my rock, Mark. You've helped me find the strength I didn't even know I had." Mark kissed the top of her head, his voice full of warmth. "You've always had that strength, Sarah. You just needed someone to remind you of it." They sat there in silence for a while, watching the colors of the sky change as the sun dipped below the horizon. The world around them was peaceful, but Sarah could feel the shift inside her. She was no longer running from her past, no longer hiding from the person she had once been. She was standing tall, not just for herself, but for the people she cared about, and Mark was right beside her, every step of the way. The next few weeks brought more challenges, but Sarah and Mark faced them together, stronger than ever. They made decisions for the future of the foundation, expanding their reach and touching more lives. Their bond deepened, and their commitment to each other grew stronger. Sarah had never imagined that this small town, this quiet life, would become everything she had ever wanted. It was not just about escaping her old world, it was about creating a new one filled with love, purpose, and belonging. One afternoon, as they were preparing for a large charity event, Sarah pulled Mark aside. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice nervous. "Something I've been thinking about for a while now." Mark looked at her, his concern evident. "What's on your mind?" he asked, taking her hands in his. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Mark, I know we've talked about the future, and I know we've talked about our plans. But there's something more, something I need to ask you. I want us to take the next step." Mark's heart skipped a beat, and he squeezed her hands gently. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice steady. Sarah looked into his eyes, her own filled with uncertainty and hope. "I want to build a life with you, Mark. I don't want to just share this journey with you, I want to build a future. Together. I want to know that no matter what happens, we'll be there for each other." Mark's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, everything around them seemed to fade away. He had never imagined a life like this, one where he could truly be with someone who understood him, who shared his dreams and aspirations. And yet, here she was, asking him to take that leap. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, I've been waiting for you to say that. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as if he never wanted to let go. I've always wanted to build something with you, and I can't imagine my life without you in it. Sarah smiled, her heart overflowing with love. She had found everything she had been searching for, not in the wealth and status she had once thought would bring her happiness, but in the quiet moments shared with the man who had become her everything. Then let's build it, she said softly, knowing that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter filled with love, hope, and the promise of a future they would create together. As Sarah and Mark moved forward together, the town that had once been a place of escape now felt like a place of new beginnings. The charity was thriving, and their relationship was flourishing in ways neither of them had expected. Sarah had found a sense of belonging she never thought she would find again. She was no longer the billionaire running away from her past. She was Sarah, the woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece, with the help of the people she loved and cared for, and with Mark by her side. Their bond had only deepened over the months, and Sarah was no longer uncertain about her place in the world. It wasn't just the foundation that had changed their lives, it was each other. Mark had become not only her partner in life but her best friend, the one person who understood her completely. As they sat on the porch of Sarah's cabin, watching the stars light up the night sky, Sarah leaned her head on Mark's shoulder, feeling the weight of everything that had led them to this moment. "I still can't believe how far we've come," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "From the woman who was running away from everything to this, a life that I never thought I'd have." Mark kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "You've always been capable of so much, Sarah," he said quietly. "You just needed the right person to help you see it." Sarah smiled, her eyes sparkling in the moonlight. "And you've been that person," she said. "You've given me the strength I didn't know I had." They sat there in silence for a while, enjoying the peacefulness of the moment. Life had slowed down for them, and Sarah could feel the calm settling in her soul. She had found her home, not just in the town, but in the life they were building together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. As time went on, Sarah and Mark continued to work together on their foundation, but their focus began to shift. They realized that their work wasn't just about giving back. It was about creating a future, a legacy that would last for generations. They began to dream of expanding the foundation even further, helping more people, reaching more communities. But they also realized that they wanted to leave something behind for their own children, a world where kindness and compassion were at the center of everything. Sarah, once driven by the desire for success and power, now felt fulfilled in ways she never thought possible. Her success was no longer measured by money or status. It was measured by the difference she could make in the lives of others. She had found peace in knowing that she was contributing to something greater than herself, and she had found joy in being part of a family that supported her unconditionally. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields near their cabin, hand in hand, Mark turned to Sarah, his face serious. "I know we've talked about the future before," he said, "but I want you to know that I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm ready to take this next step with you no matter where it takes us." Sarah looked at him, her heart full. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark stopped walking, taking both of her hands in his. "I'm talking about the future. I want us to continue building this life together. I want us to grow old together, to raise a family, to keep making a difference in the world. I'm ready for all of it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, the man who had been by her side through every twist and turn. "Mark," she whispered, "I want that too, more than anything." And in that moment, they both knew that the next chapter of their lives had already begun. Their journey had taken them from two strangers who had never imagined they would cross paths, to two souls who had found a home in each other. The road ahead was unknown, but Sarah and Mark were ready to walk it together, side by side, creating a future full of love, hope, and endless possibilities. And as they looked toward the horizon, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had each other, and that was all they needed.